In 1999, the F-117 Nighthawk was the ghost of the sky. It had flown thousands of missions over Iraq, invisible to radar, $122 million. Never been scratched in 8 years of combat. The US Air Force was so confident, they flew the same route every night. But down in the mud, a Serbian commander named Zoltán Dani had tweaked his 30-year-old radar, and he was waiting. How do you shoot down an invisible plane with 30-year-old missiles? Welcome back to Nations in Minutes. Today, we're breaking down how Zoltán Dani, a Serbian commander who ran a bakery in civilian life, did something nobody thought was possible. If you love stories where the underdog wins because the favorite stopped paying attention, hit that subscribe button. Let me start by explaining what stealth actually means. The F-117 isn't invisible. That's just marketing. What it does is scatter radar waves. The angular surfaces deflect signals away from the receiver. The radar-absorbing materials convert electromagnetic energy into heat. So you show up on radar as something roughly the size of a bird. And birds don't matter. Soviet air defense systems were designed to track bombers. Big radar signatures, predictable flight paths at high altitude. The F-117 was designed to exploit that. Fly at night, stay low enough to avoid long-range detection. Get in, drop bombs, get out. By 1999, the Nighthawk had proven itself untouchable. Serbia had the third strongest air defense network in Europe at the time. Hundreds of SA-3, SA-6, and SA-2 systems. All Soviet tech from the 1960s and 70s. NATO planners weren't worried. The F-117 flew 743 sorties during Allied force. The Serbians fired over 700 missiles at various NATO aircraft. They hit one. And it was because of a baker. Well, boss Zoltán Dani wasn't actually a baker in the traditional sense. He'd trained as a military officer, spent his career in air defense, but according to legend, he ran a small bakery business on the side during peacetime. The point is, he wasn't some elite special forces operator. He was a middle-aged guy commanding a battery of SA-3 missiles that were built before he was born. The SA-3 entered service in 1961. NATO called it the Goa. Range of about 15 miles. Designed to shoot down high-altitude bombers that flew in straight lines. Against an F-117? Useless. Except Dani didn't accept that. He started studying the problem in early March when NATO bombing began. He noticed something immediately. The Americans were disciplined. Maybe too disciplined. F-117s flew similar routes every night. They approached Belgrade from the same general direction. They stayed at predictable altitudes to avoid certain air defense zones. This was smart tactically. Avoid known threats. Maintain operational security through consistency. But it created a pattern. And as we know, patterns can be exploited. Dani did 3 things that weren't in any Soviet manual. First, he switched his radar to long-wave frequencies. Standard air defense radar operates in the X-band or S-band. Short wavelengths, high resolution, great for tracking targets precisely. But stealth is optimized against these frequencies. Dani switched to VHF, long wavelengths. Much lower resolution. You can't guide a missile with it, but you can detect something. Second, he kept his radar off most of the time. Standard doctrine says keep your search radar running. Find targets, engage immediately. Dani realized that's suicide. The Americans had anti-radiation missiles that would home in on active radar. Turn your system on and you paint a target on yourself. So he only activated his radar for brief moments. 10, maybe 20 seconds. Then shut it down. Move the entire battery to a new location. Every single night, his crew displaced. Set up, waited. Third, and this is the key, he studied when the F-117 was most vulnerable. The stealth jet had to open its bomb bay doors to release weapons. For just a few seconds, that smooth radar-scattering surface had a giant hole in it. The radar signature jumped from bird to something worth investigating. Dani figured if he could get that lucky window, combined with long-wave detection, he might get a shot. He just needed the Americans to fly over his engagement zone. March 27, 1999. Around 8:15 p.m. local time, Dani's battery is positioned near the village of Bujanovci, about 30 miles from Belgrade. His crew has been tracking NATO flight patterns for weeks. They know the F-111s usually approach around this time. The P-18 early warning radar picks up something. It's faint, barely registers. Could be nothing. Could be atmospheric interference. Could be a bird. Dani watches the blip track across his screen. Then it disappears. He waits. The battery is on full alert. Missile launchers trained on the probable flight path. The blip reappears. And here's where Dani's weeks of observation pay off. He recognizes the movement pattern, the altitude, the direction. This is a Nighthawk. He activates his targeting radar for exactly 17 seconds. In that window, the F-117 opens its bomb bay doors. The radar return explodes from nearly nothing to a trackable target. Dani's fire control officer gets a lock. He shouts the command, "Polly!" Fire. 2 SA-3 missiles launch. 40-year-old Soviet technology racing toward a $122 million stealth fighter. Lieutenant Colonel Dale Zelko is flying Vega 31. He's 30,000 feet over Serbia, running his bomb run. Everything normal. Then his threat warning system goes crazy. He sees the first missile coming through the clouds. A bright orange flame tracking directly at him. He tries to evade, banks hard, releases chaff and flares. The missile misses by maybe 100 feet. The second missile doesn't miss. It detonates close enough that the shrapnel shreds the left wing and the tail section. The F-117 starts tumbling. Hydraulics are gone. Flight controls are gone. Zelko has maybe 3 seconds to react. He pulls the ejection handle. The canopy blows off. The seat fires. He's suddenly in freezing air doing 500 miles per hour. The parachute opens. He's floating down into enemy territory. Every Serbian with a rifle and a grudge is about to start looking for him. Below him, the Nighthawk is breaking apart. Pieces of the most advanced combat aircraft in the world are scattered across Serbian farmland. The invisible plane just fell out of the sky. Obviously, the US Air Force goes into crisis mode. An F-117 has never been shot down. This isn't supposed to be possible. They launch a combat search and rescue mission immediately. A 10 Warthogs, Apache helicopters, special forces on standby. Zelko is on the ground for 8 hours. He lands in a field, buries his parachute, activates his emergency beacon. Serbian forces are searching everywhere. Trucks, dogs, soldiers going house to house. They find the wreckage first, and wait, the story gets almost funny here. The Serbians turn it into a propaganda victory. They parade pieces of the F-117 through Belgrade, put chunks of it on display, sell tickets. Posters go up all over the city. Sorry, we didn't know it was invisible. The Air Force is humiliated, not just because they lost an aircraft, but because the world now knows stealth isn't invincible. Russia sends engineers to examine the wreckage. China reportedly buys pieces. Suddenly, everyone wants to know how a 1960s Soviet missile system killed America's most advanced jet. Zelko gets rescued just before dawn. He makes it out. But his plane doesn't. Ironically, Dani shot down an F-117 using equipment that was supposed to be obsolete. But the reason he succeeded had nothing to do with the technology. It was operational arrogance. The US Air Force flew predictable routes because they thought it didn't matter. They assumed stealth made them untouchable. They didn't rotate flight paths, didn't vary timing. They treated Serbia like Iraq circa 1991, like they were fighting an enemy that couldn't adapt. Dani proved that wrong with 40-year-old missiles and patience. After the shootdown, the Air Force changed everything. Randomized flight paths, varied altitudes, never flew the same route twice. The Serbians never hit another F-117. Because once you fix the mistake, the trick doesn't work anymore. But here's the crazy part. Years later, Zelko and Dani met, not for a confrontation, not for revenge. They talked, they hugged. Zelko said he respected Dani's skill. Dani said he respected Zelko's courage. They became friends. There's footage of them laughing together, signing autographs, telling the story from both sides. The guy who shot down the invisible plane and the guy who was flying it are now family friends. That's the wildest ending to a military story I've ever heard. But what's the actual takeaway here? Technology is incredible. Stealth works. The F-117 flew 743 sorties over Serbia. One got hit. That's a 99.8% survival rate. But that 0.2% happened because someone on the ground was smarter than the people in the air expected. Can you believe that? Dani didn't beat stealth technology. He simply beat the assumption that he couldn't. The Americans got really comfortable. They developed a pattern. They assumed their technology made them immune to a guy with old equipment and good instincts. That assumption cost them $122 million and almost cost Zelko his life. It's the same story every time you guys heard. The Ghost of Kiev, David and Goliath, King's Mountain. You know, the underdog wins when the favorite stops paying attention. Because confidence blinds you sometimes. The F-117 was a masterpiece of engineering. Billions of dollars of research, decades of testing. And it got taken out by a guy who studied the schedule and got lucky for 17 seconds. That's not a failure of technology. That's a failure of respect. Zoltán Dani proved that arrogance is a vulnerability no technology can fix. Would you fly the same route every night if you thought you were invisible? If you liked this story of a tech giant getting humiliated, check out our video on the insane comeback of Serbia's Frankenstein military. Click right here to watch that next.